So, kia ora mai tātou, ngā mihi nui nāku ki a koutou katoa. When Steve twisted my arm up my back to do this, whenever you stand in front of a group of people, I always think that what we see is what we don't see, is that everybody here has a big backpack of accrued knowledge and attitudes, and that's hidden from us. So it's fine to walk out of here and go, well, that was a bloody waste of time, except for one thing. And if the one thing counts, you might walk away with an arm around your shoulder, around the understanding that it actually pays off to understand and to work with people as unique, precious taonga, not as collectives. So to put that into perspective really quickly, this is my dad. He was a shearing contractor in closest flash place would be Putaruru. And this is my mum. This guy's name is Arthur Ings. Lois Ings, my mum, my twin sister, and me. And people think that with a name like Welby Ings, I'm a new age hippie who made it up. No, I'm not. I was named after Welby Morell, who's a building contractor, right? So it just, in 1956, nobody believed that Welby Ings would be anything, let alone me. So, yeah, but anyway, but enough of that. So let's just pull this forward again. So I want to show you something absolutely beautiful about your brain, about your mind, about how you perceive and make meaning of the world. And to do this, I'm going to ask you, no miming, it's all right. Just do one thing. All I'm going to ask you to do is write a number on your palm of your hand or piece of paper after you've done something, all right? And I'll just show you something that is extraordinary about your brain. But to do that, I'm going to deal not with the current meaning of this word, but with its original meaning. That in this room here, we all make meaning of something very differently, because this beautiful thing we have called intelligence is not the same. It's hugely different. And to demonstrate it in a very visceral way, all I'm going to ask you to do is look at something and count, all right? Just quietly and write the number down. So here we go. This is from 1995, this experiment. 1999, sorry. Okay.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count?
Okay. Just write it down. And here's the thing, you can't actually be wrong, because that's that's not as innocent as it looks. It will have to do with the way you probably go, oh yeah. But it's not. Okay, if you got the number down, anybody, you can't be wrong, okay, but there'll be a spectrum. Anybody less, I know we're anxious. Anybody less than 12? 2, good. 3, good. Anybody over 18? Good. 13. If you can, just turn around to watch what's happening in this room. 13. 17. 14. 16. 15. What the hell? Why would that have happened? Here's a group of intelligent people in the same room on the same day looking at exactly the same text, counting. Some of you have got degrees, for God's sake. And yet we get a spectrum. The incredible nature of your brain was that you read something as simple as passing, well, not as simple, but appearing to be as simple as passing a ball. That differently. But let me show you something else. How many of you could have written down on your hand or your piece of paper the letter of the alphabet that is scrawled hugely behind the players? 1, 2, 3, 4. So maybe about less than a quarter, maybe about an eighth of you. Put up your hand if you saw the gorilla. Put up your hand if you didn't see the gorilla. You're probably saying, this guy is lying. Let me now play it to you. This is exactly what you looked at. Okay, and I know anxiously you're going to go, I've got to get the right number this time and try and count them. But don't worry. Whatever the way you perceive this, there's a way of looking at this, if we believe that creativity is based on flexibility, is to understand that every answer is correct. Because the unique contribution of the way the brain synthesizes something is a contribution to a greater understanding. So, have a look again.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
Going, oh my God, that didn't really happen. Well, we don't need to know how many were on your second count. But here's the implications of this. When we work with human beings, and we're trying to grow the very best out of that collectiveness, when we deal with ideas like average, or deal with ideas like correctness, we turn knowledge into binaries, right and wrong, what happens is we dumb down the potential of ways of constructing meaning. And so we end up with people desperately, just like you were on the second time through, trying to find the right answer. And that singular pursuit of the binary, of the right and wrong, is what works against getting really rich thinking. But we've been deeply, deeply trained to do that. Even to the level that you carried a degree of anxiety when you were doing that, thing. That's why you didn't say to say, or you what felt like saying, did you get 14 or 15 or 13? Okay, so given that maybe that's got some implications for the way we work with people when we're trying to get the best, the richest of something collectively forward. And so I'd like to come now to given that you think differently, maybe what your creativity is. This is Ralph Kaplan, who I really like. And he says this about your intelligence. He actually says it about your creative intelligence. He says that oftentimes if you are working very creatively, that you can tolerate, it actually requires that you tolerate things that are messy. It goes, I'm actually okay with the fact that this is not going to be an easy hit. Not nice and straightforward. And he says that, but sometimes we can find ourselves in anxious organizations that have been so socially trained to pursue the correct answer and understand knowledge as binaries, that what happens is that that the idea is to minimize surprise, to manage. This is why you find organizations doing things like having performance reviews at the beginning, where you're asked to set out what are the things you're going to achieve, and then you trot away, and then you achieve them. Oh my God, and in that trotting away was all this ability to think beyond the realm, to bring in richness. I've just seen examples watching up here just in this last hour, to bring in that richness that we actually require to move thought forward. So he says that one of the difficulties we face is that we oftentimes find ourselves in organizations that are very anxious, and so they control. And so we face quite a challenge to create environments where people can work flexibly. And so what I'd like to do is suppose that creativity has nothing particularly to do with the artistic, that might be a load of bollocks. That actually what creativity is your ability to disobey ritual in your thinking. So when we get a problem and we go, okay, so my past learning says that this is probably going to do it, and this is probably going to do it, and we get to a cul-de-sac, we've got one of two choices. We go, okay, well that's the end of that, can't be done, or we have to disobey. We have to go, okay, well we'll have to try something we don't know, and we will trade beyond experience. We will step away from our experience and the experiences of the people around us to pursue the possibility of knowledge. So that creativity, I would argue, is actually intellectual disobedience. It's when we disobey our own rituals to get to somewhere else. So what might that look like? That's creativity. This is creativity. Only the bad people in here get this one. Okay. When you don't have a great budget for the recreation, this is creativity. But so is this. Now, if you listen to yourselves, when those images went up, you laughed or you felt euphoric. You responded well. Your being responded positively to something that gave an alternative. It's a really interesting thing, because I think that one of the problems we face, particularly in Western culture, is that we've been brought up to think that rational is the great god of thinking and creativity is a bit of frou-frou on the side. But in fact, it's not. The shoes you're wearing at the moment are a balance between rational thought and creative thought. And creative thought was not picking the colour. That's aesthetic thought. Creative thought, when we work with people, when we work with organisations, when we work with ideas, we are using both what is ritualistic and fairly assured to get us something and the stuff that's beyond. And we fold those two together into a relationship. That's why we shouldn't be treating creativity on Wednesday afternoon when you're 14 years after and go, oh, we've done it now. That's why it is actually the very breath of the way we think. It's not in opposition to rational thinking, it is in a relationship with it. So, if that might be so important, this is where I came back, this is where I stole the idea. I took these words from Alan Fletcher. He said that your creativity, it's not when you do the aesthetic thing, it's when he says that your creativity was a compulsive urge. It's a normal thing to do. It goes beyond ritual actions and responses, but is only valid. It's only real when you are going into the unknown and no longer able to trade inside the rituals that have given you security. So it takes a kind of courage. So if we're growing that in people, there has to be something around being able to give people courage, giving people permission. So let me show you something, another example. I'm going to ask you a quick question. I would like you to try this. Okay, you're not going to have to show anybody. It's all right. You can be anxious and you're not going to have to show anybody. Okay. Imagine, you will have to imagine you had enough money to buy a two-storied residence for yourself. There's a staircase in it. And, but you don't have enough space to store your clothes. So try and turn the staircase into a facility that works like a staircase, but also will store coats, T-shirts, and shoes. Go. Just try and design it in your head quickly. I'm going to give you 1 minute. Now, the thing that's very important about this is I'd like you to make sure this is an original idea. All right? Yeah, so I'm going to explain in a moment why you've just started cheating. Okay, but an original way of turning some kind of staircase into a facility for storing shoes and coats and T-shirts. Okay, I'm going to stop you. Now, a lot of people will have sat there and gone, okay, well, I'm just going to lower my head and hope like hell he doesn't ask me to put up my hand and say what it was. Because, in fact, what happens is when we we don't actually exercise our creativity very much. We're happy giving ourselves tests and challenges to our rational thought. But when we actually challenge creative thought, that's actually quite minor. We think we're lucky if we stumble on it, grab it, and put a frock on it and go, look under the spotlights, it's creativity. But I would argue that there is actually a very systematic thing that stops us responding creatively to something. And I would say that person was in the shower with you this morning. They slept with you last night. You're suddenly giving somebody the hairy eyeball, I know. Slept with you last night. They had a cup of tea with you out there. And I would say that person, I would call that person your social editor. She or he tells you that they will keep you safe in the world. So you won't make an idiot of yourself, so you won't disgrace yourself, so you won't go into unstable territory. And they encourage you not to engage with this kind of thought. This is some of the stuff she or he may have been telling you. You might have got this one. That you can't, this is the denial. You can't do this, that's too hard. Or you might have got this. What a bloody stupid idea. This is disparagement. What a bloody stupid idea. It's ridiculous. Why would anybody even do that? Why would I waste 30 seconds of my time when I could be sitting here pretending to be doing this? Okay, so now these things come, this is what we're dealing with when we're working with people, asking people to make these journeys. We're working with their social editor who has actually reinforced their safety. So, or you might have got this one, which is another one of the disparagements, which is actually it's too much time to do this. It's a waste of time. I'd be better relying on something like this. But here's the one that's most common, and this is the one that most operated for most of you. So when I asked you to do the terribly difficult thing, which was original, so in other words, something that you have not conceived before, you went, oh, I saw something in Harry Potter once. Yeah. And you stole. These are all exercises in intellectual laziness, but they're sanctioned. We accept them. The one that's really tragic is in a group, is when you're working in a community where this has happened. I'm not going to do this because I don't feel safe saying it. I'm going to look like an idiot. And so sometimes you inherit communities like that, or you come into them, and you actually have to operate as a kind of a thought healer around people's potential, so that they're not in a state of, and your first people across the road with suggestions who are your permission givers, you've got to take real care of them, because everybody else is watching to see what the reaction's going to be to them. And and our bullshit detectors are very good. When someone goes, well, thank you for sharing that, now let's segue on to something else, we know, okay, I'm not going to put up my hand and say anything. Or, you're always so unusual, you're so unusual. Yeah. Because we stay safe. Our social editor is out there going, vroom, 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 keeping us safe. But the other thing that's really toxic is the idea that what the person's really asking us is to guess the answer they have in their head. So one of the most poisonous things you can do, what actually happened in this room, and we don't have time because we're very condensed, but if you actually got to talk to 5 or 6 people around you, you will have seen the most extraordinary answers to this. But the danger is, if you're facilitating that, you go, yes, there can be lots of great answers like this. And everyone goes, oh shit, I got it wrong. So this idea of the existing solution is dangerous, and it was so built into the way you studied that when you're at school, sometimes people said, go away and get a whole lot of examples of this first. We're going to study furniture, how to make a chair, go and get some pictures of chairs. It's the opposite of what you should be doing. That's asking people to abjugate, to put aside their ability to think from nothing, to draw forward from nothing, and rely on the thinking of other people because your own brain's not good enough. So, okay, I'll give you a really shitty one. It's actually a really hard one, but and you don't have to, this is the hardest one I know, but you don't have to do it now. But tell your social editor when you're driving home to shut up and spend a bit of time. So this involves what's called a double abstraction. How much time have I got?
I've lost track of time.
No, I'll get killed.
No, you're good.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the hardest one I know. And what your social editor is going to try and take shortcuts with it. So he's going to tell you, oh, I'll just do part of this and pretend I'm doing all of it. So it looks very innocent. Here's simple. You imagine a beautiful stream, and you're in a paddock of grass, and you're sitting on the grass, and below you there's a stream. If you listen carefully, you can hear the sounds of early summer. You're by yourself. It's beautiful. Now, all I want you to do is design a seat to sit on for that. But this is what the inspiration is for it. So the really tough question is this. Design a seat to sit on that captures the melody of the scent of a rose. Not the melody of a rose, not the scent of a rose, but the melody of the scent of a rose. Now that is a very hard question because you're going through, as I said, a double abstraction to it. So if you draw a rose, it's asking you about the melody of that perfume. What would the melody of that perfume be if you turned that melody into a seat? Okay, probably going, oh, thank you for sharing that one. Right. So, but I think I'm being optimistic. No, I think I'm being real. You can even feel in the stillness, part of our brain is interested in this. You go, can I do this? Can I do this? Which is in direct opposition to the social editor, which goes, this is stupid, this is a waste of time. Because in fact, I agree with Fletcher. I think that creativity is actually a natural process. It's something that we are drawn towards, and then we learn to be afraid of it. So we're drawn towards and then pull back. So The problem we can sometimes face then is when we're trying to grow this, is that sometimes we get into organizations who aspire to creativity, but we end up in social conditions like this. And this is where we employ creatives to do the frou-frou, but that's not what their brains are. Our brains are the ability to find solutions to stuff when ritual doesn't work. And so oftentimes we can find ourselves in organizations becoming tokenized as thinkers. So although it's said it's valued, the idea is if you want to survive, you'd better find some substitutes for creative thinking that we can call creative thinking but will not disrupt. They will not disturb the safety. And I want to just have a look at these two substitutes because these are, I would argue, the two main substitutes we get for creative thinking. They call themselves it, but they're not. One is decorating an existing idea. So slightly, I'll give you an example. I live out west. So, God, I'm going to get shot with this. But on a school playground there's a long fence and on it a little bright fish. And they're all swimming in the sand and they're brightly coloured. Now the teacher at that school is called Wonderfully Creative. 30 fish, lovely and bright, it looks so cool. They're the same bloody fish. All anybody did was pick the colours in them. That's not a particularly creative undertaking. That's aesthetically interesting, it's a communicative thing, but not necessarily choosing colours to paint on a cutout is not necessarily creatively that challenging. And yet in that same organisation there might be somebody else who's not artistic at all, but in the way they work with human beings, without a roadmap, without a prescription, is that they can touch the very essence of whatever situation's in front of them and work flexibly to find solutions, not with a template, not with a performance review, not with any of those things. Because your innate ability as a creative thinker exercises in the way that you work with human beings. Well, that's a very beautiful thing. Some of you will have this. Some of you will know people who have it. They're the people who you go to when you cannot find a solution to something. All of the handbooks don't answer it. So decorating, here's an example. If I said to you, because our lazy brains will probably do this, we'll go, we're going to do a workshop and it's going to be about creativity and all I want you to, you just need to come up with one image to communicate that. No language, one image. Now the decorating part of you will probably either pick a box with something going out of it, going outside the box, or a head with things popping out of it, or you'll get a derivation of this. And it might look like that, or it might look like that, or it might look like that, or it might, we could go on and on and on. But in fact, all these are decorating an idea. That's not actually challenging creative thought. The other one, which is the one which is deeply embedded, is the idea of adaptive rather than original thinking, which means find what already exists and then do it. So I'll give you an example of how deeply culturally this is embedded. When you have a wedding or a funeral in our society, there are templates for how that happens. And people, rather than asking, how would I show love? How would I celebrate a commitment to love? We go, okay, the dress, the catering, we take other people's templates. Even though that is probably one of the most profound expressions of your life, we'll do it. So I was interested in the palliative care because my twin sister, who you saw, died a few years ago. And while we went to the undertaker in order to, she wanted to know the room she was going to be in. Ings women are quite controlling. But she wanted to know, and we actually cut the film for her funeral, everything that was, well, no, it was actually a very good process. But she did not want to go into the incinerator on somebody else's rituals. You know, that's a human thing to desire something of uniqueness. And yet those things are marketed so that your home, if you had to redo your kitchen, you can buy a magazine called Your Home. You know, your garden, and we go, it's not yours. It's not yours. Your kitchen is going to end up looking like this. It's someone else's. It was done by cut and paste and adaptation. And yet, if we were working with you as a creative thinker, all we'd say is this: don't even pick up one of those magazines. Go and live in that kitchen for 1 year and it will talk to you. Listen to her. She will tell you about how you want space to work, where you want light. You can get help with the technical stuff. But when we're trying to work creatively, we go, don't pull in the answers of other people, pull in the nature of the question and breathe it. and it will talk to you. And that will give you a kitchen that doesn't look like that. It probably looks like you and responds to you because it's in dialogue with your ability to create. And we're all capable of this. We just abjugate in a culture that sells us other people's ideas and calls them ours. So I've got to, but the danger with this is what we end up is educating this to this. And that is plagiarism. That is lazy thought. It's styling based on somebody else's solution. And if we do that with a paragraph, we call it plagiarism and burn everybody's fingers. But when we do it with thinking, we think it's quite okay. We think it's all right. Okay, so I'm just going to have to jump some stuff here. Okay, so one quick way around this. Nobody loves you the second time you do this, but it works really well the first time. So we do this often in organizations when we've got an organization who's trying to break something new into the world. So we ask the question, what would our competition or ordinary people come up with? What are the three options that they're going to come up with? And we put them up. Oh, there'd be a staircase with cupboards underneath that you could pull out stuff. There would be drawers that you could pull out. And you go, okay, that's really good. We may not use those. Now, everyone volunteers the first three up. After that, they won't speak to you again because their idea went up there and everybody saw it. But it trains us to work away from the lazy answers. And we are capable. This is the beautiful thing. We are actually capable of it. You can't exist in this society without being capable of it. So, what's the culture that grows us? So the culture that we've often been led down looks like this, which goes, this is the protege model. Here is the thinker, the leader, the CEO, the hero, the deity, whatever, and they will show us how to become like them. So we will work inside the models of knowledge and thinking to get to that place. So that's why we go and consult people to go, well, how did you get there? But in fact, there is another model, a completely different model that looks like this. The leader is not the person with the lamp. The leader is not the person with the lamp. This is that leader who says to people, how can I help you? What do you need? This person may have a very good understanding of the culture. They go, look, it's my job to have your back. But as a group of thinkers, my job is to have your back so you can think beyond what we've currently thought. So it's a very, very different model. So leadership around creative thought generally looks very different to the protege model that most organizations are built on. So I'm just going to jump some things because we better get to the end. When things go wrong, this is what it tends to look like. Generally, if I get asked to go into a relatively, I can't find a euphemism, I can, but I won't, a toxic organization, where people, and they often say, look, I've got such a great team, but they just will not come up with good ideas. These normally become features of that world. There'll tend to be a very high level of micromanaging going on. There'll be a high push towards risk aversion, even if the rhetoric's different. Be very low levels of trust. Alongside that will be often signs of professional jealousy. There'll be a heavy push towards some way of measuring what these people are doing. And there'll be and people who report well will elevate quite quickly in that system. Not necessarily the people who think well, the people who report well. So the opposite of it tends to look a bit more like this. It's a very high trust group. There's a clear encouragement of risk. Attributing success to the people who did it, rather than grafting the success onto the person who holds the position of positional leadership. High levels of flexibility and disobedience is thought. I'm not talking about being a shit here. I'm talking about people who re-question productively to get to somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to jump to Mara Erickson, and I'm going to come right to the very end now. I'm going to jump all these ones too. Okay, to get to here, this bit. This bit that's really important. You know, when we go for a job and we bang our CV down on the table or we accumulate our profile, the things that really matter are very rarely in that. You know that when you try to interview people for jobs and you go, I'm trying to get underneath all of this. I would argue that the essential thing that exists inside somebody who can grow creativity is the same thing that exists inside people who grow great people. And it comes from two Greek words that we understand them in association with a word that when they combine has become into common parlance. The word enthusiasm comes from entheos, which means inner God. It means that inside some people, there is this burning light. And it does interesting things. We talk about enthusiasm being infectious. You get a person who has a high level of entheos, and they can infect the people around them. People, if you take the concept of mawhana, the Tongan concept, they'll gravitate towards the warmth of that thinking. This is why these people often show the actual levels of agency and leadership in organisation, but may not hold a position or headship. But they have this light, this peace that burns even in difficulty. And then they work out ways of how do you sustain that and how do you grow that in other people. And beyond all the fat CVs and the things that we've been to, maybe that peace in you is the essence of what makes you good to be in the company and to grow the goodness in other people. So that takes strength. But it's a fine, fine thing.